That's one of those ones that sounds familiar that's going to keep me up at night because I can't figure out where the fuck that came from.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I hate that movie. That's why.
I hate you.
If you enjoyed my intro music, you can find that and lots of other songs by the fantastic Towhead by following the link in the description. Right, on to the show. Who do we have here? What an amazing lineup I've got for you today. So I'm going to introduce all my guests and then we're going to jump straight into it. So, first of all, Josh Entner. Hello, how are you? What do you do? And what are you doing here?
I'm here because I think I jump-started this debate on an episode of Skeptic Hangout where we talked about cloning and went into the transporter problem organically. And I seem to be the only person, well, it was only me and Laura, but I seem to be the only person of the two of us that had a correct stance on whether or not you survive being transported, because I think the sense of self is something more than just the body containing the self. And I'm not going in spiritual. I'm saying your brain's a computer. You upload it into another computer.
Okay. Josh wants to start the show already, but he can't do it yet because we've got more guests to introduce. Johnny P. Angel.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you? Who are you? And what are you doing here?
I'm Johnny P. I do some shows on the ACA network, the Atheist Community of Austin network, nonprofits, not the least of which, the flagship, and Talk Heathen. And I have been a lifelong Star Trek fan for, coincidentally, my entire life.
Secular rarity. Who are you and what are you doing here?
I am here, I guess, because I am being forced to be here. Richard has some really damning material on me that I don't want to get out there. No, I'm excited. I think this will be fun. We've already started off kind of heated, so I'm hoping that we can all remain, good friends after the end of this. But honestly, we could come to blows here today. So, but who am I? I'm just some idiot that hangs around and talks about stuff. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. It'll be fun. So.
Yeah, it is going to be fun indeed. And finally, not at all least, Jason Sherwood. Who are you and what are you doing here?
I am also very deep in the Atheist Community of Austin catalog of shows. I'm typically behind the scenes, although you have seen me on, of course, the flagship show of the ACA, the nonprofits. And I've also been Jason to the rescue. What I'm doing here today is apparently somebody wanted to have an actual Star Trek expert who can tell, exactly what the transporter problem is and why Josh is just completely and utterly wrong.
Okay. I'm going to start off before we get into it because I know everybody's chomping at the bit. I'm going to give a little bit of background just so our listeners and viewers know what the Teletransportation Paradox is. Okay, so the earliest kind of modern reference to it was by the Polish science fiction writer Stanislaw Lem, who described the problem in the mid-20th century. He put it into his philosophical text, Dialogues, and also in his Star Diaries of 1957, where the hero visits a planet and finds himself recreated from a backup record after his death from a meteorite strike. It was further posited by Derek Partiff in his 1984 book, Reasons and Persons. And he considered a hypothetical teletransporter, a machine that puts you to sleep, records your molecular composition, breaking you down into atoms, and relaying it to Mars at the speed of light. On Mars, another machine recreates you from local stores of carbon, hydrogen, and so on, and each atom in exactly the same relative position. Of course, most people are familiar with the transporter from Star Trek, and that is why we've got our resident Star Trek expert on board today. So we're going to jump right in. As Josh said in his introduction, he was the one who kickstarted this whole thing, so I'm going to let Josh go first.
Well, we tried to have this debate, but you dodged my question. I had asked very clearly, what does it mean to have yourself? And then you have said, oh, I'm not going to answer this question. I think I know where you're going with this, which is a dishonest tactic. I was trying not to straw man you, and said you straw man me. So what I would say, my sense of, I'll say my sense of self, and you can come up with your bullshit to get around this on your side. But I would say that your sense of self is your continuity. I can see that thing behind you, Johnny, and that it's distracted as hell.
What?
Your sense of self.
Oh, that's from Blake 7. That's the transporter room from Blake 7.
I'm like trying to concentrate. I'm like seeing this thing behind Johnny. I'm like, what the fuck? You're throwing me off. Your sense of self is you have the chemicals in your body interacting with your consciousness. And your consciousness is interacted with all your memories and of what you've had. So yes, they are technically rebuilding what you are, but your continuity stops as soon as the transporter stops, and they rebuild it at the other side wherever you're getting transported, and then the continuity of your consciousness starts over again. The reason why that gets to be yourself is because I don't see this thing that's containing my memories and everything as essential. Like if my memories get recreated on the other side exactly as self, my consciousness continues on the other side there, I don't see how you differentiate that from what is here right now. It's different atoms and particles, but it's like when you change a computer component to another computer component, you don't like suddenly say, oh, that's a completely different computer. You say that's the same computer, but with different components in it.
Okay. So
Jason.
Yeah, no. Here's the ultimate defeater to that argument.
He's wrong. That's the ultimate defeater.
No. I mean, he is that. But no, the ultimate defeater is this little not so well-known episode of The Next Generation. And Josh, do you know The Next Generation?
I've watched every episode.
Are we talking about relics?
We're not talking about relics, although that is a good metric to go by, kind of, in that it was used, the transporter was used as a lifeboat. But no, we're talking about the continuity. I'm addressing Josh's continuity of self.
Continuity of self is what matters within the transporter problem.
Right. And I get what you're saying with that. However, there's a little episode, you might not know it, called Realm of Fear, where Barclay had immense fear of the transporter. He logged so many hours in the shuttles, and you wouldn't believe that. But they had to use the transporter, and they had to use his expertise to fix this ship that was in an ion field, and so they were having some issues with the transporter. And it's like, but no, we've got it. We've got a link. We can make this work. You see, from the start of the transport cycle all the way through, and he's still himself. He's himself in this transporter. He has presence. He has consciousness. He has knowledge that this actually happened. And then you see him slowly materialize onto the other ship. So your continuity argument, I get what you're saying. When you go back to the original series and everybody kind of just like stops, lights happen, and then they go to the planet, nothing is happening, lights happen, and then all of a sudden they're there. I
Yep.
get where you're coming from that, but that is not how transporters work. There is a continuity throughout the entire cycle. Richard, I'm sorry you had to have a short show. We'll see you next time.
I'm sorry, but that doesn't really seem to square anything for me. You're saying that he has the continuity throughout the entire thing, so that also means that there is zero problem. There is no transporter problem, according to what you're saying.
Exactly. You say there is a problem. There's no problem. There's
No.
complete continuity.
I'm on the side that there is no problem with the transporter. There is no transporter problem. The problem that everybody brings up is that they think you die and like a replica takes the place. I was saying that the replica is still the same person that went through the transporter, because there's the continuity of who they are is transported into that new person.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's why you're wrong. But I'm going to come back onto that in a little minute, and I want to hear from Johnny and SR. So if SR wants to jump in first, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think what Josh was saying initially is that it does seem to be the case that most people, excuse me, when discussing this, their issue is that sense of connected consciousness, right? And it's the question of whether or not basically we're doing the same thing when we go to sleep, right? We go to sleep, and for a little period of time, we may not have access to that consciousness, but when we wake up with this understanding of, hey, I went to sleep and my kind of access to my consciousness stopped for a little bit, right? And others will say with the transporter, well, no, that's not what's happening. You're actually being completely taken apart, and that consciousness is ending, and then you're coming back. It sounds to me like Jason and Josh are on the same side, which is the side that I would be on, which is, yeah, going through the transporter doesn't actually end that particular consciousness because of the continuity on the other side, whether it is just a pause and then a restart, or you actually do get to be conscious that entire time. It sounds to me like the sense of self that we care about is still there. So
all right, I think we should take a vote. Who thinks that because I'll take whatever side is the opposite of everybody else. Because I can see both sides of this one. Who thinks that the transporter is a death machine?
The transporter in the Teletransportation Paradox, which was the original paradox, it is a death machine.
Who thinks it's a death machine?
I'll raise my hand to that.
Yeah, the Star Trek one is a continuation machine, which is why Josh is wrong in the original problem, and it's why so many people get this confused.
You're making
we're
a
talking
distinction
about
between
two
the
different
two.
things.
Yeah.
See, the problem is the body does die. But the body is taken away, but there's no significance to the body, because of the body without my memories, my consciousness and everything doesn't mean anything. It's just like if I were to get Alzheimer's, I would say like with it deep within the disease, I wouldn't be me anymore. That would be just like a husk of what I used to be.
Right.
So like if my consciousness is not carrying on, that's not me. Whether or not my consciousness stops, whether there's continuity, or if there's continuity, it's 100% I'm right. But if it were to stop right once he says engage, and then it starts again at the other side,
It's energized. Yeah.
Whatever. Nerds. It doesn't matter if the body, the meat that was me, is not the exact particles of meat that were me on the first side. If they reconstitute it exactly the same chemical going through the body and all that kind of stuff, I don't see how that's me dying. That's a body that used to reside with my consciousness is dead, but the new recreated me is exactly the same consciousness. I don't think it matters.
Would you say that two different, let's say, let's take any car, let's take a Ferrari F40. If you have two Ferrari F40s side by side, both made of exactly the same components, but not
components are not the same exact.
I know thing. That's why you're wrong, sir. If you've got two Ferrari F40s side by side and they're made of exactly the same components, are they the same car?
You can't make them of exactly the same components. You can make them with similar components. Right. That's where your analogy ends.
Okay,
see,
so
you're trying.
Go on, Jason.
Yeah, you're trying to reference, and maybe you're not knowing you're doing it directly, but you're trying to reference Second
Tom Riker.
Chances. Yeah, Thomas Riker. And in that regard, you do have a copy of same components, but in your example, you have two Ferraris made of the exact same components. And unfortunately, we do not have an analog for that with our current level of technology and understanding, because regardless if it's stamped of the same type of metal, if it's made from the same type of plastics and rubbers and glass and all that, those two Ferraris cannot be the same car. And you could maybe make an analog to the ship of Theseus, in a transporter accident, in again, Second Chances. But again, the two cars side by side, yeah, you can have the exact same model. I could have two Volkswagen Jettas. I could have two Suzuki motorcycles. It doesn't matter. They cannot be the same thing.
And show me two cars besides Christine, if you were to replicate Christine, that have consciousness that matters in this point, because that's where I'm arguing from, is from the moment of consciousness. Because I would argue, you cut off my arm on the floor is not me, that was my arm. So like,
you can make an argument for kids.
Doesn't matter.
It's conscious.
Christine or
conscious
Kit,
car.
Christine or Kit would make a difference, but with
it's
just like
consciousness, not just
to,
a product of the physical, though.
Is consciousness not what makes you though? Because to me, consciousness is what makes you. That's why I did the Alzheimer's analysis, because without my consciousness being eroded by Alzheimer's, that takes away from who I am. Same way with, if we were going to go into Star Trek's, the evil doppelganger universe, where you wouldn't call Spock with a awesome goatee as the original Spock, even though they're made up the same components, because they have a different level of consciousness than the other Spocks. They're definitely.
Well, we don't know they're made of the same components, because just based on their different food intakes, different life experiences,
their DNA would be the same. Fine, whatever. Their DNA would be the same.
Maybe.
But it was to make they look the same. It would to make my point. But they're still different. They're still different is the thing. That one of the Spocks made a choice to get a goatee and turn evil. The other one made a choice to not grow a goatee and stay like logical.
He's actually not evil on that one. He's in a world of evil people, and Spock is just trying to survive.
Yeah, but what he does after the events of Mirror Mirror does kind of show that he can have a capacity for evil. Like even in his attempts to bring other races and people together and all that, it eventually does destroy the Terran Empire, where we then get into the events of all the Mirror episodes in DS9.
All right, we're straying. Here's the way.
We got people going for technicalities, and it's strange.
You're losing the argument, Johnny. We get that. Okay,
no,
go ahead.
I'm not losing the argument. I'm saying that first of all, the mirror universe makes no sense. It's absurd. But for funsies,
any less than Kelvin?
That makes more sense. No, that makes no sense either.
It's called a multi-universe proposition, which means that all universes are possible, which does kind of wreck Star Trek canon, but we can go into that.
But the idea that timelines would be so remarkably different, and we're getting far afield. It's another conversation. The thing I see is this: in the Star Trek universe, there are things called katras. There are spirits that can be conveyed from one body to another. In the Star Trek universe, I see no problem with the katra, or the soul, or the spirit of one James T. Kirk, for example, getting onto the transporter pad, getting dematerialized, going into the pattern buffer, Heisenberg compensator, all that stuff rematerialized, and the katra somehow makes it through that same process and goes over there. Because in the Star Trek universe, the soul exists. Roddenberry was an atheist, but the soul exists in the Star Trek universe.
Okay, you're assuming that the katra, which is a very Vulcan thing, is something that everybody has.
Well, we know that we're related to Vulcans in the Star Trek universe because of that one episode where we're all just from that progenitor
the chase,
species.
which is
That explains
really
all
kind
the
of
bad makeup
poor.
and why they don't have any creativity. I got that one.
Right.
Yeah. Everything is bipedal, and we don't have like slime monsters or whatever that aren't the bad guy of the week. But here's the problem.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. The Katra is specifically a Vulcan thing, and is something that can be manipulated through mind melds, through different type of telepathic abilities within the Vulcan species. Nowhere else is the Katra even hinted at. So when you say, okay, the Katra exists, it actually has to be physically transferred from one person to another. It's not like it's a truly spiritual thing. Spock literally rewired Bones's brain, okay, and the Katra of Serac literally rewired Archer's brain, and he had to actually then bring it to this Vulcan temple in order to again physically interact with something in order to move the Katra. So I would say that the Katra isn't a soul in the way that a theist would think of a soul. I see it as a physical presence, a electrical chemical rewiring of the brain, which then you can then transfer from person to person.
So there's an energy transfer. So there's an energy transfer that goes
rewires,
that rewires the brain, and then it travels down the neck into the arm of the person who then remember and and then it goes through the fingers.
Yes.
I mean, I feel something when somebody touches my head like that.
By the way, no one likes it when you do that. No one ever has liked that. I've done it many times over the years. Remember, get the fuck off.
I mean, you must not know the right people then.
Well,
yeah.
And that's a you thing.
Let's get a drink, Jason. We'll see where we're at.
Let's bring Gessar in. Let's bring Gessar in.
Let me just ask a question, because I think maybe this will help clear it up. Because I would say yes to this, which is if we sent something through a teletransporter that's not alive, if we sent that Ferrari through to the other side, would that thing that comes out the other side be the same car? Or are we all on the same page on that? Or are we on different pages on that?
On this is the problem I have with it, because in the original problem it wouldn't be, because that car would be recreated from different components, which is why
a Theseus thing.
Not necessarily.
But it's instantaneous.
But we'll come on to that. We'll come on to the ship of Theseus. But in the original Paradox, when the spaceman is transported, he's recreated all his atoms, everything about him is recreated from local stores of carbon, hydrogen, and so on Mars. Right. So it's not him who continues, which is what happens with the ship of Theseus.
So is your problem with that the fact that it literally is not the same atoms?
No,
but it seems to be.
Because
it's
if
not.
That's
the original thing ends completely as soon as it steps into the transporter. It ends. The original person ends. Everything about them ends, and it's a carbon copy of them, which comes out of the other side. It's
with
not
all the
them.
memories.
It's got all the memories. It's got, but it's not them.
You're so
the original
close.
them is gone. So this is why I use the Ferrari example, because the Ferrari example, it's made of the same components, but every atom is completely different.
But it contains no consciousness.
In the example that Richard is giving, he would be right, because the technology that transporter works on would be just that. If it's pulling from local material and is trying to reassemble it, it's not the original material. And we do have, as stated, a ship of Theseus issue here. Is that the same person? Is that, the electrical chemical, is that the person itself? But that's not how all transporters within all of sci-fi works. But Stargate has a different type of transporting system. Actually, they have 3 or 4 different types of transporting systems that are known about,
aside from wormholes.
Aside from wormholes, yeah.
And this is
Wormholes
why
are
I
a different
think
thing. You've got
this
space
is why
folding.
I think
You've
it's
got,
wrong.
yeah.
This is why I think people are wrong, because they hear the transporter problem and they hear it explained, and they automatically think of the Star Trek transporters, which don't relate to the original problem. They work on a different level, and they try and figure out the problem on that. Now,
Okay.
a couple of people have mentioned the ship of Theseus, so let's talk about.
I
the
don't
ship
agree
of-
it's ship of Theseus. I just want to make it clear. Go ahead.
the ship of Theseus, which is a gradual changing of components.
Sure.
In its original formation, the ship of Theseus concerns a debate over whether or not a ship that has had all its components replaced one by one would remain the same ship. It was originally, I think it was originally put forward by Plutarch in the Life of Theseus.
Yeah, that's right.
And Josh nodding.
Which
no,
doesn't translate well from the original Klingon, but go ahead.
But yeah, and that is a changing. It's a changing over time, where one at a time the components is a genuine identity problem.
Yes.
Where one over time that each component one by one is changed. So at which point, when you get to the copy, when there were no more original components, at which point over that period can we say that
Right.
is no longer the original thing? And there is not really a single point over that period where you can
Right.
do that, which is different to the original transportation problem, where it's an instantaneous end and a copy made.
But I don't think it's actually instantaneous, because it's the transporter of any nature has to have a first atom, has to have a first quark that is grabbed.
Has to have a first cause.
And has to have a first quark, has to have a first atom or electron that is converted into energy. And so arguably it's just a very rapid ship of Theseus problem. It's not instantaneous. Nothing's instantaneous.
Yeah, because it sounds like the
can be in
issue that
sci-fi,
you're
but-
having, Richard, is the fact that it is all happening all at once. It's the complete breakdown of the individual thing all at once, as opposed to over a steady period of time. But yeah, I mean, if it is going down atom by atom, then yeah, that would still just be a sped up ship of Theseus thing. But I think in either scenario, the question is, what is so important about the particular molecules and atoms that are making us up right now? Same with the car, right? Because if there are 14 carbon atoms in this little speck over here of my shoulder or whatever, right? Then why does it matter? These 14 carbon atoms, those 14 carbon atoms, who cares? We just put them all, and it comes back together and it's still the same construction. Why are these initial components so important for identity?
I don't think they are. I think that if you in the original paradox, Richard, there's a scan done, right? And the pattern is sent to Mars, and then using local components, it's reconstituted using the other components. In the Star Trek version of a transporter, and I don't know about Doctor Who or Blake 7, they don't really go into it. There's a matter into energy and then energy into matter thing. I don't think it matters, no pun intended, because I think that the matter on the original matter, the meat, just as I'm about to step onto the NX-01's transporter pad, gets disintegrated.
Choice.
No, I wouldn't do it. Gets ripped apart on an elemental, beyond element, subatomic level, and converted into energy. I would say that it's broken down into constituent energy patterns. So it ends up being the same thing to me. I mean, there's nothing special about the atom that I'm made up as. It's just that I'm made up of a certain pattern. But as I see it, unless there is a soul, like a katra, that beings exist, then it is a copy. It is a copy with all of my memories. And when I step out the other side, it's not me. It's a perfect copy of me with all of the memories, unless the soul, which is non-corporeal, non-energy based, but exists in a supernatural state, which unless that exists, it's a death machine.
This,
Although on relics, Scotty reported having a sense of time and space that was skewed when he was in the transporter buffer for 100 years. He reported having a continuity of consciousness.
but
He also has a little bit of degradation, which is why he did not know that Kirk was dead, even though he was there to witness it happen.
Right.
Some of the degradation could have been part of his memories.
Yeah, generations.
So in case anybody's like, oh, but why did he know this? What it is? It's degradation. Don't worry about it. Also, Scotty was pretty old, even though once he left the Enterprise D, he actually went to work again in ship design and was instrumental in designing the Sovereign class.
that was good, useless info. Thank you.
You're welcome. You are welcome.
I would argue that saying that a soul or anything is needed for it to be you on the other side or Katra on the other side is where you lost me, because I was with you 100% until you added the soul thing. And I would say the soul is what makes people attached to the current atoms or whatever they have now. A soul would mean why they'd care about the fact they're breaking it down, because maybe the soul can't follow you all the way over there. I would say continuity of consciousness is the absolute only thing that matters for sense of self. I don't care what atoms I'm made up of, as long as continuity of consciousness exists. So it stops right here. They build me up of whatever the fuck's on Mars. I don't care where those atoms came from. They build me up, have the exact same consciousness. I remember everything up until the transporter started. And then I still have like the same chemical issues. Like if I have the depression or something like that, I'm built back up with the same mental issues that I had or before I got transported. That's where it fucking matters. Because if you change like chemical issues or you change brain chemistry or anything like that, then it's different. But they build you up exactly the same with the exact same
It's
consciousness.
Unverifiable.
Well,
There's no way to do it.
Till we build one.
Not just because it's
Well,
not.
that's a cop out. Come on.
No.
I mean, this whole conversation is
Wait.
unverifiable.
No,
because
not
it
just-
doesn't matter.
It's unverifiable.
No.
It's like, okay, Janeway is not a monster.
You
because
misunderstand.
It's unverifiable.
You misunderstand. I don't mean
Janeway's
it's
not a monster.
I don't mean it's unverifiable because it exists in a fictional universe. It's unverifiable within the universe because the being that comes out of the transporter has continuity of consciousness insofar as much as anyone does when they go to bed and they wake up, right? They have all of the memories. They remember getting on the pad. They remember seeing the stuff come down. They remember suddenly there's a changing. That new being has continuity of consciousness as much as anyone.
That makes it
monsters
still you.
in the data stream.
Arguably, though, I personally believe that if I got on the transporter pad, it would energize and it would just go black.
I mean,
because I don't believe in Katras.
I mean,
I don't believe in Katras either.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I want you to separate the idea of a soul from the idea of a Katra, because again, we don't know in the Star Trek universe. We don't know that the soul exists.
What about
it was
Paz?
Even mentioned, no. It was even mentioned in Measure of a Man, where
Good episode.
she says, like, does Data have a soul? I don't know if Data has a soul. I don't know if I have a soul. So how can we judge based upon these ideas that are, as Johnny said, unverifiable? But, the Katra is something that exists. That's something that is real. Even if you don't believe in Vulcan mysticism, it has been something that has been proven in the Star Trek universe, which leads me to believe that the Katra is something that is significantly different from a soul, because we have not seen any other species able to transfer their consciousness other than, say, the Borg, say Data himself, who uses technological and biological components in order to transfer things over, except Data uses just primarily technological components. So yeah, if we separate the idea of a Katra from the idea of a soul and just throw the soul out, because that's what we want to do in the first place. Okay, the soul's gone, but the Katra is something that is real. It is tangible. Is measurable. That's the other thing, is that it is measurable. And yeah, so that ideas like, oh, well, it destroys the soul, you go to sleep, whatever. No, we have that consciousness. It's not a sleep thing. Like, there's no loss of time during that entire data stream.
Okay,
Well, I have a
I'm going to bring in a different concept of soul, seeing as we're talking about souls, which is very relevant to identity. Before I do that, I'm just going to say, somebody said in the green room before we before we started recording this that this is going to be a nice, friendly conversation, and no
It
one's going to
is.
fall out.
Yeah, no one's. We're not fighting at
I'm
all.
loving
It's
it.
good.
Right, I just want to raise something. Then I'm going to give Secular a chance to have a word because he's been drowned out, I think, a little bit.
It's
It's
good.
weird for Secular.
Enthusiastic. Very enthusiastic.
Normally, you can't get him to shut up.
Okay. we've got in Buddhism, there's a concept called anatta, which is made up of two words, which are an, which means not or without, and atta, which means self or existence, essence. So anatta is the idea. It's what is considered to be the soul or the equivalent of the soul in Buddhism. Now, what we get is not a lot of people confuse this. A lot of people think that Buddhists, because they believe in rebirth, believe in a soul that is reborn, and they don't. It's anatta. It's a set of it's a set of attributes that people cling to, that they consciously cling to, and that is what is reborn. So I think that's an interesting aside. It can be it's related to as an impermanence. So whereas a soul in the kind of in the Western religions is considered like a permanent thing which goes on forever, and in some Eastern religions as well, it goes on forever. In Buddhism, it's an impermanent. The soul is an impermanent entity which is made up of clinging to certain attributes. So I think that's a very. I think it relates to the ship of Theseus. I think it's got a very good parallel in the ship of Theseus. In the when the Buddhist is reborn, they believe that they change, but what is their essence changes all the time, and it's their clinging to that essence, it's their identifying with that essence that actually is reborn. So bearing that in mind, I'm going to give Secular a word, and then everyone else can jump in.
Yeah, I think that is really important in this context, because I think one of the issues that we have is a set of descriptors that equals Richard, right? We have, at the end of the day, a whole list of criteria that is, Johnny, right? And so when that steps into the transporter, what we're doing on the other side, more or less, is checking off based on those criteria. And so the question is then, if we're checking all the boxes for those general characteristics for what we've said is, Jason or Josh or me, like, well, then why is it not the same thing, right? If at the end of the day, what our self is, what our essence is that, more or less clinging to various attributes, right? Like Josh has a beard, Josh wears glasses, SR's got long hair, he's got this red shirt on, whatever it is. Well, then if all of those are met on the other side, that seems to me like it's the same thing. It seems to me like it's the exact same thing, especially if we're not like in a what's that movie? Prestige, where he's literally making doubles of himself and having to off one of them. Spoilers, I guess, if nobody's seen it. But
I watched that in preparation for this.
Yeah, we're not in that situation. We're not in the situation where there actually is a second one made. We're in the situation where the original is now gone, and then we've got something else here that seemingly hits all of the criteria of the original. So again, I would still stand very firmly. I don't think there's an issue. I think the self still continues. So
I'd ask you this: if Data and Lore switched like their memories or whatever, and like switched them into each other's bodies, would you call Lore the body that contained Lore's originally contained Lore's memories and his consciousness or whatever? You switch that with Data's. Would you call that Data, or would you call that Lore if you switched him?
Like before,
Yeah.
right? Like we have
Well,
that happen with
before sucked, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
But-
and
if you 100% swap just like their memory cards, their consciousness, all their memories, would it be a completely different? Would it be Data or would it be Lore in that body?
so when you're going back to, we're going to go to the comics a little bit here. Prior to now, don't shake your head, Jenny. So in Countdown to Picard, I think it was Countdown to Picard.
The series, Picard series.
Yeah, there was the Countdown comic where Data was actually the captain of the Enterprise E, because what happened was Data's consciousness actually rewrote B4's limited positronic matrix to something that was much more complex and something that could actually handle Data's consciousness. Now we also go
As you
later
do.
on, and actually no, was it Countdown to Picard, or it might have been Countdown to the Star Trek 2009. But either way,
Either way,
Data was captain, and no other canon really wants to address that, which, I mean, rightfully so. Because then we go into Picard, where Data actually did fully die, was not captain, and then could also clone portions of himself through like
we're
a single
straying.
component.
This is
we're
important.
straying.
This
We're
is
straying.
important, I'm sure.
What I want to really address right now, this is really important, is why SR decided it was wise to wear a red shirt in a Star Trek discussion. That's what I really want to know.
I like to push the envelope. I like to find the line and just jump over it.
Yeah.
But now I mean, I don't know if that line that I'm jumping over is into a transporter. I'd probably do it. I feel okay with it.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it on Mars, and I wouldn't do it in anything other than a fantasy series, like something like Star Wars, where there is nothing real. It's all just feelings.
Okay, I've got a question based on that, and I think this might be a really important question. It might not be. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But
This has been incredibly important. Come on.
We seem to have two kinds of different ideas of transporters going off in this conversation. One is the one where you step into it and you are killed and replicated as from using completely different components, and that replication has your memories. And we have one where there is a continuation of yourself, where you step into it and your consciousness remains and it just gets transported to another place. So I have a question based on that.
I'm good with either one.
Would you step into any or both of those transporters? Is there one you'd step into and one you wouldn't? And if so, why?
I think initially I feel better about the second one you described, but I think it's mainly just because the first one has that description of you die when you go into it. But the thing that I care about at the end of the day, for what matters to me when I think of self, is maintained in both scenarios. There's no difference in either of them. The result at the end of the day is what essentially is this SR. Like, yeah, okay, technically there was a meat sack with this consciousness and memory in it.
An ugly bag of mostly water.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, for sure. Nicest thing I've been told all week. But but that thing is definitely dead. Yes, but the next ugly bag of meat sack and water, whatever you phrase it, Johnny, that thing maintains everything that seems to matter to me. When I ask, what is me, right? When I ask that, the answer at the end of the day is going to be, various memories that I've been a part of, and desires and understandings and feelings. All of that seems to transfer in both scenarios. It's just that the first transporter literally has a sign on it that says, warning, you will be killed and then transported, So I don't know. I think both at the end of the day give me the result that matters.
Yeah, they're
Okay,
both-
Jason.
So I gotta say, I don't know. Either one of them, I don't know. Even if there is a full continuation of some sort, I don't know. What I would need more information. Now, supposedly we are, getting so advanced in our technology now that, people are worried about us hitting the singularity in like the 2040s, where there's going to be a very blurred line between technology and the ability of consciousness. And maybe people can upload their consciousness. By the 2040s, I'm going to be, considerably older. And then, when I get close to death, if there's a service or whatever that says, hey, you've lived all this life, would you like to be part of an experiment to upload your consciousness? And it's like, well, if I'm going to die at that point, sure, let's, go ahead and do that. And then I would be more equipped to answer that question. As I am right now, I gotta say, I don't know that I would do that. I would need to see if it really is that consciousness continuing on. That's why when, Richard asked a show of hands, do you think that it is a death box? Even with the Heisenberg compensators, even with the continuation with all that, I don't know. And so I would have to say at this moment in time, within my knowledge and experience and all that, probably not. But if it did exist and it was safe and it was absolutely everything that it is supposed to be in Star Trek, maybe.
I don't
But
know
I would
who
choose
to
a
hand
shuttle
this.
first.
I don't know who to hand this to the next because I don't know who's going to go off the most. We'll go with Josh. Josh, you go next.
All right. I'd go with either one because I don't really think there's a problem because I don't think there's any significance to this meat sack right here. I really don't understand why it would matter if my consciousness ends right here and then is picked up back then with different molecules or atoms. It's the same me. I don't have any attachment to honestly, this meat sack could be doing a lot better. So like the fact that they're gonna replace it with different molecules or whatever, but has the same continuation of consciousness is perfectly fine because I believe the only reason why you could find any significance to the current meat sack is because you believe in a soul and you think that the soul would get destroyed. I have no belief in a soul. I almost treat the body and the brain more like a computer that's storing my consciousness than anything. So recreate everything. That's great. I have one problem with Jason's thing where he's talking about transhumanism, and the only problem I would have with like putting my brain into a computer is I don't know if like the chemical issues within bodies also make you who you are. So the computer would have to be able to replicate all the chemical issues bodies have. So, but just strictly either one of those transporters, I want the one that cuts off because I don't want to be like feeling my consciousness. I want to be fucking instantaneous. So I'd take the first so-called death machine, which only kills the body. It doesn't kill the part that fucking matters because it's going to get recreated on the other side. So I'll take the first one preferably, but as long as there's no like fly going in there and I'm not going to worry about becoming Brundlefly or something, I'm all good.
Never go full Jeff Goldblum.
Locutus P. Angel.
Yes. I would, unless there's continuity of consciousness, and there's no way, I think, to establish that in universe, I would not do it because any more than I would be perfectly happy with cloning myself along with exactly the pattern of my neurons, right? And then having that one go off and live a life that's exactly like mine. I have no interest. I know that on some level, there is a being known as Johnny P. Angel that is living my life with my memories. I'm this version, right? I don't want to end. I want to continue as long as it's comfortable and enjoyable to do so. And the fact that the universe, the rest of the world might enjoy or despise the fact that there's a Johnny P. Angel that's not this one. I don't care. I'm attached to this version of myself. So unless I can guarantee that this iteration of me continues uninterrupted, or, you know, maybe like uninterrupted with like I fall asleep and I wake up like I do like every night, I would never get on that machine. I don't care if I could go off and a version of me, a duplicate of me could go off and be, you know, the king of the galaxy. I don't care. I want to continue for as long as it's enjoyable to do so. And because it's unverifiable that new version is me, I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
You don't need an idea of a soul in order to understand that there is still a continuation of you. And yeah, like Johnny said, it's like if that copy, clone, whatever you want to call that thing, that you that has a stopping point and then another beginning point. Yeah, it has all your memories and it'll do whatever, but you are not you at that point. Whether you believe in a soul or not, you are not quite you. And so it's no longer you, the me that is before transporter.
I'm going to let you finish, Jason, in a minute, just 1 second, but I do want to come on to the how in a second as well. Then I want to do that specifically, but through talking about clones. But before we do that, just finish your point.
Yeah, I don't care about the me that is the copy, the clone, the whatever you want to call it, because that then isn't me. Is when you're talking about that going to Mars version. If you're talking about the Star Trek version, as long as, like Johnny said, there is that kind of continuity, there's that continuation. Okay, yeah, fine. Then I would do that, but I would need to know that is something that actually happens. That there's something measurable that says, okay, you are still you. You are not a dead you in a you body youing around, beyond you.
What's the break in continuity, I guess, is maybe the issue that Josh and I are having. It seems like for the three of you in the actual one that like Parfit talks about and stuff, where it's like you're dying on Earth and then you're being reconstructed on Mars and stuff. It seems that what Josh and I are saying is that the important thing to make you still you is still there. And it seems like y'all are saying, well, it's not.
We don't know. We don't know if it is.
Well, what is the break in the continuity? What is the problem that is actually being presented?
The disassembly is the problem.
Let's stop there then, and let's talk about clones. And let's pretend for a moment that we're not getting transported, but we're still alive, and an exact clone is made of us, as Johnny is pointing out for us very helpfully there. And that's would that make any difference to you? If there was another SR or another Josh or another Jason running around.
Yes. Well, now we run into the many different types of, as much as there's many different types of transporting, there's many different types of cloning. Johnny's got the multiplicity. There's also the 6-day violation issue. That also brings up another
primer.
I mean, there's so many different types of cloning out there. In the multiplicity, it's like, okay, one of the clones slept with his wife. Now, is that still okay? Is that, because it's him, but it's not him? What about the clone who was cloned of one of the clones and didn't come out quite right? Well, wait a minute. If it's a clone, shouldn't it have been an exact copy? Shouldn't there have been no copy errors? So
there's deterioration. Yeah, there's copy errors.
Yeah.
But even with
and then
even
in
with
6-day,
in
6-day you have these people getting cloned multiple times. You can check under their eyelid and see the number of bumps.
Is that worth it?
No.
Is that worth watching?
Yeah. I love Arnold, but no.
Okay.
If you have absolutely nothing to do and you're just bored out of your mind, I mean, it's like any other Arnold movie. You don't watch it because things are going right in your life.
Whoa.
Okay.
Strong disagree on that last part.
So I think with clones, even if even if we're saying that it's a perfect copy with no degradation, I think once we get to clones, then it's obvious that there are two consciousnesses there. There is a break in the continuity to the point at which it can't be reconciled again into a singular understanding of self. And so at that point, it's like, well, no, it's a different person. It may.
So what's
be
the
me.
difference?
The
You have
difference
a
is
divergence.
right. The difference is the break in continuity of consciousness,
Which is what happens in
Because-
the first transporter problem.
No, it doesn't.
The
No,
only difference is
I
that
agree with
the
that.
original one is not there
which is
to
important.
continue.
That's important
That's a
because
big deal.
if the original is still there to continue, then that means that that consciousness is now diverted from the other consciousness, and they can't be reconciled. In the first one, what we're talking about is a stopping, a pausing, more or less, and then a pickup later on. Whereas with a clone, what we're talking about is two different entities that may, for all intents and purposes, at the very instance of being cloned, may be the same consciousness, but the moment they take a step, they've gone completely separate lives now. And that's the issue.
Because the
And-
brain
and-
can't reconcile both exterior brains at the same time, and so
Right.
they're ultimately going to be different. One of those clones is going to go on and constantly have sex with his wife, but then one of the other clones is going to
Good
have
life.
sex with his wife as well, but at a different time, and you can't reconcile those times.
Yeah, if your transporter is creating a clone of you and not destroying the original, you have a problem with your transporter. You don't have a transporter problem. So like,
Well, in that case, they didn't have a problem with
That's
the
a good turn of
transporter. They
phrase.
had a problem with the environment that caused the transporter accident. It
But-
was an environmental issue.
yeah, because honestly, the transporters have issues all the fucking time, and we're
Yeah.
going with the original problem.
I would say,
Like a clone
Yep.
getting created from you, they're the same person until they take, as soon as consciousness is available on both of them, they're completely
Right.
different people. They're new individuals. The
Right.
transporter stops your consciousness dead right there. And one scenario, I know Jason has scenarios where it continues on and all that stuff. But as long as the consciousness ends and starts off with another being, it's the same person. But as soon as if it's created two different people or there's two different people, you've created two different identities.
But if there's free will, if there's no free will,
There isn't.
Yeah, no.
if there is no free will and everything is determinism, those two people will be doing exactly the same things.
No, because they're
they
standing
can't-
in a different place. As soon as
Yeah,
they're
they can't physically occupy the same space.
exactly.
Right. That's because, I mean, even if we want to talk about like and let's please not, you guys, but if we want to talk about like quantum entanglement and superposition,
We're not
of
going
particles and
quantum.
stuff, Yeah,
No, we're
let's
not
not.
gonna
I feel
go
I
there.
know
That-
a lot
that's
about
what the
quantum.
We are not
No, no.
Deepak
Yeah,
Chopra. We're not going.
Right. Let's
That
not
is
do
what the
that.
Heisenberg
But again-
compensator is for. It's
but-
designed to get rid of that quantum bullshit.
But so again, even if we're if what we're saying is there are literally two physical entities, even if every single one of the actions that they're going to take in any given scenario is already determined, it doesn't matter because they literally cannot be in the exact same, they cannot both hit the exact same golf ball at the exact same time in the exact same way. They may both hit a golf ball the same way and they may both shank it into the sand pit or whatever, but it doesn't matter because they're literally two different entities. They can't occupy the same space.
Like if you've
So-
seen the one with Jet Li, one Jet Li had more martial arts ability than the other Jet Lis, even though they were made of the same fucking shit.
or Everything Everywhere All at Once had,
Great.
Oh,
movie.
that
Great
was
movie.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
really
bunch of
good.
different ones.
Yeah, really good movie.
And she just kind of stole from her other selves.
Yeah.
Well,
Can-
it's very
can-
much like the one. In that
Can
respect.
rocks get googly eyes? I think that's what we should get together to talk about next time. Whether or
That-
not
that
rocks
scene
can
broke
have
me.
googly eyes.
That scene
you
broke
know?
me so hard. Like you have no
It
idea.
was so good. I love that.
I thought that movie was quite lovely. It had everything I wanted.
Yeah.
It
I-
went
I-
a little too long, but other than that, I loved it.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed living in that space of that emotional weight. But we're diverting ourselves from the
Yeah,
purpose
very
of our
far
conversation.
from that one.
Yeah.
No, I think at the end of the day, what we care about is whether or not we have that sense of like, hey, I did this yesterday, like, hey, I went to bed and I woke up, and if what we have with the various methods of transportation, right? Like this, if we have that and it's still a singular entity and that isn't continuing anywhere else, I feel like we're checking all the boxes for the things that matter to us when we talk about what it means to be us.
Yeah, you people on the other side of this issue, define how you define yourself. Are you defined by the particular atoms that are in you right now, or are you defined by the atoms that are on Mars?
I define myself as a phenomenological stream of consciousness, right? That I perceive a continuity of existence, right? Of intake of the senses, a memory of where I've been, and that's how I define it. I could be. I just finished reading. Been reading a lot of science fiction lately, in between reading early 20th century British literature for funsies.
Yeah, those go together real well.
Well, yeah, you get palate cleanser with that
Something
stuff.
like that.
I'm a classy guy, all right. But I finished reading. Oh God, I don't remember what it was. But I can replace my arms, my legs, my torso, my organs, my heart, all that stuff. I don't really care, right? But anything that would interrupt, you cut my fucking head off and replace my body with, I don't know, Colossus's,
Right.
whatever, steel, whatever. I don't even care. But as long as I have the perception of a stream of continued existence, I consider myself. Now, yeah. I'm not exactly the same. I have a metal hand or whatever. I have synth parts. I don't care. But if I perceive that I don't know, if I have it, right? Perception is weird because you can tinker with the brain, right? And you can give yourself a perception that never happened. Correct?
Yeah,
like you
absolutely.
eliminate memories.
Yep.
Well, they happened, but if you that's sort of a paradox of if I believe that I have it, do I have it? I don't know. There's a practical nature to it, and if I were able to enhance my brain with synthetic parts, give myself the ability to perceive new spectra of sensory input.
I feel like we're going into Officer Murphy territory here.
Ooh, Officer Murphy. Drop it. I don't know. That's how I define myself. I don't care about the meat. The meat's all right though. But as long as for the record, everybody, the meat's okay. It's getting a little stale. It's aged steak at this point.
That's how you hit on the ladies. It's meat's all right,
The
ladies.
meat's all right. And it's still safe to imbibe.
So if you started
strike that. Strike that.
We'll fix that in post.
Yeah.
If you started losing your memories, Johnny, like to the point that
I have.
Okay, well, to the degree of like Alzheimer's, like Josh was talking about earlier, would you at some point
grandmother
in that process say that you're not the same? You're
I would
not
say
the same person.
It's the problem of identity, and I think of like
that's kind of what the show's about.
It is. It's been described as the self is a mesh of chainmail where loops are constantly falling off and new parts are constantly coming on. And that is what the show is about. And I went to a high school reunion, 15, 20 years ago, and I heard stories about myself being told that I had no recollection of, and that's the kind of imperfection of existence, the forever fading away and regenerating in new senses, So I don't know. If I wouldn't be the same, but I would be the same. It would be the ship of Theseus of the self, right?
We kind of already are, though.
Yes.
Other than
allegedly
the brain doesn't have as much of that replacement, but a lot of our cells, our skin is constantly dying off, flaking off, regenerating with new material.
Yep.
Our muscles do the same.
Mhm.
There's a lot of the human being that is a ship of Theseus, but supposedly the brain is this special case, which I don't think
It's
is
not. I don't think
fully
it is,
the case
yeah.
as well.
I think that
I don't think it is. I think it's.
Yeah.
I think I may be wrong here. Please, anybody
Probably.
correct me. I think it's. There he goes. I think it's something like every 7 years the entire
Yeah.
body is completely.
Not completely, because that was one of my original arguments. And like the brain, for the most part, a lot of the cells stay the same, but everything else in your body.
So the my cells are 35 years old, is what you're saying?
I think the brain cells stick around a lot.
brain
I
cells
don't-
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I think Johnny's
sorry.
memory's somehow gone.
Yeah, no,
The brain cells stick around, but
Johnny,
like,
we're a little concerned about you now.
Yeah,
like-
it's definitely lost some years.
I don't
like,
think
I
that's
didn't
the
have
case.
I didn't have this arm 34 years ago, but like in the brain, that's all fucking there.
You're saying that those cells, I got the impression that they replace themselves. They divide and then they keep the same amount. Or no,
that was one of my original arguments, and I looked this up beforehand. And unless Google led me astray, which Google has led
Probably
nobody
did.
astray. Everybody that Googles everything 100% accurate all the time. That's doing your research. I'm being sarcastic.
Josh
But,
Entner does not represent all of us here.
Josh
we're gonna
Entner
put-
definitely represents none of us here.
I'm gonna put a notice on this that I represent everybody. That's gonna be the video title. Is Josh represents this video and everybody's views on it. But the brain's the only thing that does not change. Everything else replicates and changes, but the brain, pretty much you're using the same shit that you had when you were younger. Unfortunately.
See, when we take things as immutable fact, like the whole, every 7 years the body just kind of replaces itself. I feel like there's going to be a lot more nuance there, and we would have to talk to somebody who is a little bit more of an expert on that. Like we would need a force Fakai in here. We would need an MD aware or somebody who actually has studied the body and biology to a
Shannon
much
Q
more
as well. Yeah,
Shannon Q, absolutely.
My 5 minutes of Google aren't good enough for you, Jason?
Coincidentally, no.
Weird.
Again, I think even if we're in a place where the neurons in the brain are undergoing mitosis and are creating these new cells and stuff, as long as the information that was there before, when I said, again, those characteristics, hey, this is what it means to be me, having had these experiences, having had these desires, whatever it is, right? As long as those are still there, again, I feel like what we actually care about on a practical sense is still all there, and it would still be the same person. It would still be the same thing,
But it's not, though. Like, even from the moment that you're born, you have replication errors within your DNA.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about mutation or what can lead to cancerous material and all that, what turns the hair gray. There are replication errors, and DNA does have some self-correcting mechanisms within it. But even in there, when you start utilizing those self-correcting mechanisms, there can still be replication errors within that. So again, your ship of Theseus, instead of, let's use this. Instead of replacing a pine panel, you use poplar wood instead. Now, it's still filling in that gap. But it's not the same wood. So does that also translate into being the same? Because you're replacing those panels and all that. You don't necessarily have access to the same trees. We don't have necessarily the same access to the same data because of how it changes as we age.
I don't think I think if we go back to the anatta, right? That kind of idea of what is the self is this attachment to certain characteristics about the world. I don't think at the end of the day, when we're asking ourselves, is this the ship of Theseus or is this not the ship of Theseus? I don't think that like the particular wood is what we're going for. I don't think that's the criteria at which we're saying this is or is not the ship. It
But
may
could it
be. It yeah, I mean maybe, but I think the idea is a bit more holistic with a W in the sense of encompassing the entirety of the thing, right? And when it comes to individuals, what it seems to me that complete thing that we care about is the idea of whether or not we feel as if we went to bed and woke up. If that's not how we feel in this process, well then, yeah, maybe it is a different person, right? But if at the end of the day, what we're saying is the lights go dark for a little bit and then the lights come back on, I don't see why there would be the concept of, hey, this is different. Whatever the actual component parts are, if those lights come back on in another meat sack, awesome. If those lights come back on in a computer on a desk, what does it matter? It's still the same consciousness, right? It's still the exact same continuity of identity in either scenario.
Would that be
Johnny, you look
four
like you
lights?
have something to say. Sorry.
Well, I just have this
Go,
really
Jason.
quick question
Yes.
that is completely stupid and derailing. SR, would that be 4 lights or would that be 5? That's what I want to know.
Take your pick.
Okay, go ahead,
There
John.
are 4 lights.
I don't excuse me. I don't think that again, the universe no, I was gonna say the universe might be the same if there's if my dog enters a transporter beam and then comes out as a duplicate, right? It might
More
be
of a wish
interesting.
than anything else.
It might be, yeah, gosh, I'd like to duplicate this guy. It might be one at a time. One at a time. I'll tweak him a little bit every time. No offense, guy. He's over there. He's sleeping.
I would do that with Stella too, but
yeah. The individual's experience ends. This is again, this is an existential issue, obviously. Excuse me. I do think that I don't care if there's a clone of me that gets reproduced over and over and over for all of eternity. I mean, I do, but I won't experience it. I will be gone. And so I care about this iteration. So I won't be there to enjoy Emperor Johnny P. Angel in the year 2525. I won't be there to enjoy it.
Man is still alive.
So there's
Yeah,
like an
man is still
attachment to
alive.
those atoms. I mean, those are some pretty sweet atoms you got there, but
They're okay.
I think
okay.
Emperor Johnny P. Angel has
They're okay.
just as good atoms.
The god.
There's good atoms on both sides.
They sure are. No, I mean, it's like I don't do things merely for. I'm having some technical troubles here. I don't do things solely for my own experience, but to some degree, I do. Like I'm not going to be here to enjoy the fruits of my labor. If I plant a tree, I will not be here to see it bloom and give me shade. I do it for the sake of the pleasure I get from knowing that I'm doing it, but I'm not for the individual experience of doing it as well. Like I'm not going to get the apple tree. When I'm an old man, if I plant a tree, I'm not going to eat the apples, right? But I'll know that there are people out there who will eat the old adage, right? But so on that level, yes. But I won't be there to be there for it, to experience it. So I don't care that there may be a true copy of my consciousness. I think what happened, there's an example of this in science fiction where,
Really?
yeah, imagine that, where
You don't say.
you don't say. I can't think of a good example of it. Again, this whole thing comes down to, I think, the colloquial way we think of identity versus when it breaks down. The concept of identity really does break down when you examine it on when you pick it apart using the tweezers. It doesn't actually exist in the way we think of it, because on the human scale of 80 years, give or take, we don't deal with it, right? We don't really deal with it. I go to sleep and I wake up. Am I truly the same person? Well, in all measurable senses, we are. I behave in a similar pattern. I don't feel alien in my skin, right? I have access to my memories largely, and there's that experience of, well, I forgot a few things, but these are things I wasn't using, and it's part of the reality of living as a human being, that there's a little bit that fades and a little bit that comes on. But it's science fiction is wonderful because it does explore the peculiarities of the human experience. I'll give an example. In a way, I'm colorblind and talk about it all the time, but I can't see certain colors the way many people can, and so I put on those glasses that correct color blindness. They don't correct color blindness. What they do is they move the spectrum around, I believe, in a way that you can now tell the difference between two different colors that maybe look the same for you. It skews everything else, but it makes you able to see that. And that's what science fiction does. It skews reality in all these other ways so that you can focus on this one part of the human experience. And so where am I going with it? I guess on a human scale, we don't ever have to deal with this. And I don't think there's any way to really prove it. And so it's an interesting thought experiment. And I like that. It kind of makes you, when you have problems, when you're thinking about the self, it both allows you to, like, oh, my life is so hard. Well, what is my life? What am I? Right? And you think about it on a cosmic scale, and it's both frightening, but I think it's also freeing in a way, right? Because the thing that you're so attached to as the self is a thing in flux. And so it may help a person not adapt, but cope with the tragedies of life. And that's why I'm a big sci-fi fan. That's why I love it.
I like something you said a bit ago in your long monologue.
Right? Typical people, like one thing, and then I drown it out with a bunch of shit.
At the
It
very
was
beginning.
good, though.
Yeah, it was.
When you were talking about your dog being cloned, how important are other people in this and their perception of us?
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about people and perceptions, typically YouTube comments are very, very unimportant to the continued existence of it. But we do have actually a continuation of ourselves to some degree because of what we're doing right now. All of us have been on various shows in some form or another, and so a copy of who and what we are from that snapshot in time is going to continue on, so people watching this and say, 2257 will be like, oh, and even if YouTube doesn't exist, there is a potential, because of how we record data and we're doing such a great job of it right now of how we record everything, and we're also doing a terrible job because we also record things that are not true. But some parts of us are continuing on. Now, is that our true selves? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But somewhere down, sometime down the line, somebody's going to watch this and go, huh. So that's what a bunch of idiots thought of how transporters work in 2022.
Woody Allen has a great line. He's a creep, but he has a great line where he says, like, some artists want to achieve immortality through their art. I want to achieve immortality through not dying. And that's, to me, it's a very cold consolation to know that anything that I've ever done on YouTube or my paintings, which, I do some paintings, that they will exist until they deteriorate. I mean, I don't care. I'm really anchored in this whole continuation, this phenomenological stream, this continuity. Like, anything that will jeopardize that is difficult for me, even if it means saving my family from a sinking battleship. That's going to be a hard one because, again, I might be making the world a better place, but I will not be there to enjoy it. I would rather live on the street and be injured and in pain all the time, knowing that I've committed some great sacrifice for some greater sacrifice so that others might benefit, than be snuffed out, and that's to me why it's so important that I will never get on a teleport pad. Just
It's
Dying for a cause just means that your cause has now ended.
That was
what you're
feeling
trying to
really noble up until you brought in the teleportation pad.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you were on like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington levels, and you're like, and I will never get on a transportation pad.
Yeah, fuck that. Because I won't be there to enjoy the fruits of it in any way. I might, but out of love, I potentially could do it. Again, it's one of those things where it would have to be significant.
I love to get places quicker, so I would get on that transportation pad in an instant.
Okay,
I do hate driving. That is my kind of sticking point. It's like, well, if I didn't have to drive, maybe I'd just go ahead and queue myself somewhere.
Yeah, even if I'm wrong, which I'm not, but even if I was wrong and I could avoid traffic, I would kill myself 100 times on the transportation pad and avoid that crap. I'm in California, like LA traffic. If all of you lived here, you'd be on the same side of the transportation problem as me.
Have you ever gone on a really long road trip though? Because I mean, a lot of it is boring, but there are some things you could see. It's like, oh, I didn't know that this existed here.
Wow, look at all that dirt! Amazing.
Nebraska is like that.
You're so cynical.
There's a couple of states I could
You're
pick
such
out.
a Gen Xer, I tell you what.
I don't know, I think.
Richard?
Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think this problem is a lot easier when we think about things that aren't alive. When we're thinking about abiotic material, it becomes easier to say like, yes, it's the same rock, but I think the issue is because of the fact that as living things, as humans, we not only can experience things, but we also have the ability to kind of think about those sensations that are happening. And it seems to me that is, at the end of the day, the crux of what matters when it comes to what is ourself. Us being able to experience and feel the things around us, and then also have like thoughts and feelings about that inside of us. And if that gets pulled out of this brain and gets put into anything else with no other changes or alterations whatsoever, to me, it seems as if we've just continued. We have just continued. All we've done is we've just shifted out some of the planks of wood. And again, I that doesn't seem to me to be a problem for identity, because it isn't a problem for the car. It isn't a problem for the tree, right? It's just that we have this experience of being in this particular meat sack.
But we're not a car and we're not looking at trees.
Well, yeah.
Have you looked at the trees though?
It's been a while.
I sometimes look at the apple trees I planted a few months ago, but beyond that, not really. No, I couldn't care less about
Will
that.
you live long enough to enjoy those apples, Jason?
I mean, hopefully. I mean, it should be about 2 years before they start bearing fruit. And if I'm dead in 2 years, then I've got
you got
I got other
problems.
concerns.
Plant like tomatoes or something. Tomatoes come about real quick. You don't need to get a whole fucking tree on it.
Yeah, but I got 2 trees. I plant them, far enough apart. I can put a hammock between them and just have like a really there's
just
a
have
whole
apples
thought
fall on
process
you as you're sleeping.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I create a new math.
Call this guy Isaac Newton over here,
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty sure
That's
that's
what
gravity
it's-
2.0.
Josh,
Yes.
any kind of final thoughts?
My final thought is I think consciousness matters more than whatever is containing the consciousness. And so but again, I don't believe in transhumanism because of like when you go into a computer, things get kind of murky. But as long as you have the same biological makeup on it, it doesn't fucking matter. It's still you. I don't care if there's a meat sack that's dead on one side of the transporter, as long as the meat sack on the other side of the transporter is exactly the same, because the meat sack is just like the organic computer that contains me.
Jason.
I have some issues with what you're saying. I find them slightly inconsistent with each other, because it's like I don't care. I care about the consciousness, but I don't care about the form that contains the consciousness. And I can agree with you on that, but then you kind of skew a little off into where the consciousness is broken down and rebuilt. I don't know that is consistent with each other. Now, again, I could be wrong. You could be wrong. All of us could have potentially been. No, you definitely could have been wrong on this one. Don't worry about that. It's okay. I was wrong once. It sucked. I got over it.
I've never experienced it myself, but go on.
Yeah, I know you have. But anyway, the simple fact of the matter is that until we actually get to that point, until we can measure and all that, I'm going to be agnostic on this aspect of I don't know that this is what would actually happen. It is cool to think about, and let's see if we can get to that point, if we can get our technology to that point, and then go from there. I personally would have no problems eating a replicated or transported apple, because that is a much more simpler organism than myself, allegedly.
Johnny.
Apples are pretty complex.
I wouldn't get on a transporter pad. I would discourage anyone that I cared about getting on a transporter pad. My dog is like a complicated little machine, right? I wouldn't put him on the pad out of principle. It wouldn't affect me in any way, except in the back of my mind, I would strongly believe that it was a copy and I would have killed my dog or my friends. So not going to do it. Glad I live in the 21st century and not the 22nd century.
Where they have become accustomed to this and they're no longer have illogical aversions to transporters. But
life is cheap. Life is
cheap.
If
Johnny and Josh stop talking long enough, do you like to give you
good luck on that.
analysis?
I think the answer is clear. 5 out of 5 panelists can probably agree that we just need to put more time and effort into building teletransportation systems, so that we can actually start to get some really good data and experimentation done on this. So if you're watching this in the future and you just happen to have like a few $1 billion you want to donate to science or whatever, get on that for us so that we can do that, and Josh and I can be proven right. So it's good when
that pad.
Yeah, it's
so
good.
Don't buy Twitter. Don't buy Twitter.
Yeah.
Research teleportation.
Yeah.
Why couldn't you go back in time and tell Elon that?
Yeah, use that money for better purposes, like teletransport.
I think I don't think we've resolved anything here today. I think
I feel like we did.
Yeah,
I think apart from Josh is still wrong. I think that the question of self, the question of identity, the question of continuity is one that has been asked for many thousands of years. It's one that we've come up with a creative and exhaustive list of excuses and reasons, whether it's a soul, whether it's the not soul of Buddhism, whether it's the physical eternity of Taoism, whether it's the ship of Theseus. There are lots of different ideas floating about, and it's as Johnny said earlier on, it's something that's very exciting to think about and talk about, as we've been doing for the last couple of hours. Before we go, what have you all got going on, Josh?
I'm on Bloody Good Film Podcast, the best film podcast you'll ever hear. We just basically talk action and horror movies. I don't know when this is coming out, but right now we're doing Christmas episodes, so it's all going to be action and horror Christmas stuff coming out. If it's after that, I have no idea what the fuck we're talking about, but it's probably going to be entertaining.
Johnny, you're muted, which is a typical Johnny P. Angel.
It is.
Good Johnny move.
Talk heathen and the nonprofits. Although I'm not really on, just behind the scenes. With Jason. Jason's doing a heck of a lot more work there, but yeah, you can see me there. I think that's about it. And here, and that's about it.
SR.
I'm not positive when this is coming out, but I know coming up for me. I have a chat with Nuria Khan, the Holy Humanist. So she's an ex-Muslim, has a channel, does a bunch of wonderful stuff. I'm very excited for that. I know that I will be on Talk Heathen again not too long with the great Johnny P. And I will also be again on the nonprofits with some good people. So you can always find me at those places. And then I'll just pop up every so often after hopping through, you know, a teletransportation pad. And, you know, whether or not I'm the same, I'll still
A
keep
version of
talking.
you.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
version.
I'll still treat you like you're the same SOI.
yeah. And I'll still be the same dipshit and never shut up. So yeah, as long as all that's the same, seems about close enough to me. But
Jason.
Primarily, I'll just be pushing buttons in the background as I always do. You know, you see a lot of me doing this. You know, it's like, hi, yep, I'm waving, I'm crew.
You're the best waiver.
You know, and you know, I'll be on nonprofits every so often, and I might be on some of the other ACA shows. If anybody wants to invite me to any other thing for reasons that go beyond my understanding, you know, I'll go ahead and show up. I definitely, anytime we can talk about Star Trek, you know, invite me back, because I love talking about Star Trek.
I think we
Yeah.
gotta do something.
Does
like
this
this
scratch?
again. This was fun.
Yeah. Does this scratch your itch, Jason? We've been talking about a nonprofits episode of Star Trek for a long time.
We have. I mean, I personally would love to do something that everyone else does, and therefore I don't do it. Is I would love to just be able to talk Star Trek, you know, on a week by week basis, because as much as New Trek is
Trek Talk.
problematic. You know, it's some of it's problematic. Some of it is actually kind of good. Trek is back, and I would love to keep talking about it. But like I said, there's like 1,000 different podcasts that talk about Trek, and just be another drop in the ocean.
Who cares? There's like a billion different movie podcasts, and I have a bunch of fun on my podcast with movies.
Yeah, but I don't have the time or resources to put into a whole podcast like that.
Before we go off on another one, thank you everybody for joining us. If you want to hear more of Towhead, who do my intro and outro music, you can find their link in the description below. Please check these guys out. They're all very good friends of mine, and I have had a very, very good time tonight. Okay, Josh, maybe not. Maybe Josh has the kind of poo on the shoe. But other than that, no, these are all very, very good friends of mine. I've really, really enjoyed tonight, and I will see you next time.